To create our color palette with its strong violet gold color scheme, we're going to start by mixing some of those really strong violet grays to be the underpinning of our composition. So here I am mixing some ultramarine blue with a little bit of Fanchon red, otherwise known as naphthol red, and a little bit of white so that I can create a really strong, rich violet gray. So it is a slightly grayed down blue, and you can make it warmer or cooler depending on how much of the red you add in. You can make it by mixing ultramarine blue and Montserrat orange, or you can make it by mixing ultramarine blue and Fanchon red with white. Now, in either case, it's going to take on different qualities depending on how much of that blue to red proportion you have. So it'll look bluer or it'll look warmer depending upon that combination of the two. So we're also mixing up here a little bit of white and ultramarine, French ultramarine blue. And that French ultramarine blue, slightly violet blue, is going to be our cloud color in the far distance. So we're mixing basically blue and again some of that red in there to make it a little bit more violet. The difference is we're not going to dull it down as much this time. So it's a lighter version of that darker blue-gray we just mixed. If you have French ultramarine blue, use some of that. If not, use just ultramarine blue and add a little bit more of the Fanchon red to it. Now here I'm taking the ultramarine blue and I'm adding some of that first mixture we made to it and a little bit more of the red to make a very dark blue-gray, violet gray. So I'm going to mix it first for the hue and then add a little bit more white to create the tint that I need for the painting. Do not forget to wipe that knife frequently in between. So this is Montserrat orange, and I'm going to mix Indian yellow in with it, about half and half. If you don't have Montserrat orange, remember that you can mix the same basic thing with your alizarin orange, azo coral orange, or your Fanchon red and white. So it's about half Montserrat orange and half Indian yellow. And that makes a sort of mango orange color that we're going to use for our fields for where the light is hitting it. It's going to be our most strong, most intense color in the fields. So next we're going to mix some more Montserrat orange and Indian yellow, a little bit more of the Indian yellow in this one to make it even more orangey, so that it will look a little bit more yellow-orange than our first pile of Montserrat that had the Indian yellow in it. Next, we're going to add some of our dark blue-violet mixture to it so that we are neutralizing our orange that we just made. Because remember that violet and orange, blue-violet in particular, and yellow-orange are complements. I'm pulling off about half of that to make another mixture. So what we're trying to do is develop a number of different values, intensities, and temperatures of that field color so that we have a wide range to work with as we mix. So adding some more violet to that top pile and dulling it down more. Again, it still has a great degree of richness to it because we've combined pure pigments together. So we're going to get a rich neutral. Next, we're going to take that down even more in temperature and in value by adding in some of our medium lavender, our lavender gray. The intensity of the blue violet in there is going to neutralize some of the yellow orange even further, so it gets darker in value and cooler in temperature. To take it down even a little bit more, so there's that equal distribution between the three different values and intensities I've got there, I added a little bit more of the Egyptian violet. So next we're going to mix another series of neutrals with our green ochre. So in that first pile, I'm mixing green ochre and some of our Montserrat orange Indian yellow mixture. So it's going to end up being a very warm neutral. It'll be fairly close to the one that we mixed above with the violet and the Montserrat Indian yellow. So then I'm going to mix a little dioxazine violet into the green ochre, and it's going to make a fairly dark, fairly warm violet color. Not as dark as the color we're going to use for the no tan though. Now we're going to lay out our greens. So several piles of Italian Terra Verde, one for each of our different greens. And that darkest one is going to be the one in the far left, putting about half green ochre and Terra Verde right there on the right. The one in the middle is going to be Terra Verde with a tiny little bit of violet in it. So we're going to start with our darkest one, which is going to be very, very violet. It's a green violet, but still fairly violet. It's going to be our darkest dark in the whole painting. Once that's mixed, I'm going to take what's left on the knife, mix that in with our middle green that is just mainly Terra Verde. And then make sure your knife is clean and go to mixing the one that is going to be the warm green, which is the green ochre and Terra Verde. So we're going from cool and dark up to more warm and light. Notice that our lighter green there is still not particularly light. It's below middle gray value. So we're going to have to mix some lighter values as well. In order to do that, we're going to squeeze out some more of the green ochre. And then we are going to both lighten it up and warm it up. So we're getting 2 more piles of green ochre. And working this way helps to make sure that we're going to have consistent, harmonious color. Adding Montserrat orange to that first pile. So that it's a nice, warm, light ochre color. Then we are going to warm it up even more with Indian yellow. So in essence, it's the same mixture as our half Montserrat and half Indian yellow. added to the green ochre. But then we're going to green it up a little bit. Right now it's super warm, super yellow. So we're going to take some of our lighter green, lighter warmer green, and start adding that in there, and also add a little bit more of just our plain terre verte, because we need to green that up. We need to have even intervals between our different colors and values. So right now there's a huge jump between our lighter warm green that we already made and this green, and we want it to be a little bit more even. So keep adding some of that terre verte until the difference between those two greens is not quite as strong as it is right now. It's beginning to get a little closer. Remember, it pays to go slow. If you have too much too fast, you'll end up with this big huge pile that's too dark, and it takes a lot to lighten it up. So it makes sense to go slower. You'll also see I'm comparing it to the one that is in the row above that does not have the green added to it. So just keep adding that green until you have more even intervals between the hues and the values. Then we'll be good to go. Notice it both cools it down and darkens it up as you add that green to it. Wipe a lot. Paper towels are a lot less expensive than paint. So now I'm laying out a little bit of Montserrat and adding just a tiny bit of our half and half mixture to it, so that we have a color that is not quite as pink as the Montserrat. It has a little bit more yellow in it. And taking ultramarine blue and mixing that with white for our sky. Blend it in and make sure that we are mixing a value that is dark enough that it's going to provide contrast and balance with the values below. So once we have that mixed up, then we're going to take a little bit more, get it down a little darker. Make sure you have it thoroughly mixed so you don't have any sudden dark spots. Then take what is on the back of the knife and mix that into the next pile of white. And we'll also add in a little bit of phthalo blue so that we have a gradual greening up of that blue, as well as lightening up. And again, it's a color that really needs to be mixed thoroughly, because all it takes is a tiny little bit of that phthalo in there that's not mixed to really extremely impact the rest of your painting. So again, then I'm going to take what was on the back of my knife and mix that into the next pile of white, so that in this pile there's a little bit more phthalo than there was in the last one. And I'm going to add a tiny little bit of Indian yellow to it so that it also becomes a little bit more green. That's going to be towards the horizon line. So a tiny little bit more Indian yellow. Again, mix that thoroughly. Those dye colors really can be a problem if you've got a chunk of them in there and then you put it into your painting. Okay, that middle blue needed a little bit more phthalo in it to make it more halfway in between the two other blues, so that it's a little bit lighter than the darkest blue and a little darker than the lightest blue. And making it a little bit more green so that it is also halfway between those two blues in temperature as well. The reason I added Indian yellow instead of adding more phthalo is I didn't want it to darken up too much. So I'm trying to get that balance of halfway in between those two outer blues. Then I'm going to mix a few colors for clouds. So I want cool, a warm, and then the third pile I'll mix in just a minute will be more of like the sunlight hitting the clouds. So we're going to mix a warm cloud color with a little bit of yellow ochre into that pile of white. So that we can make a warm cloud color. And add it slowly so that you don't go too dark too fast. Then we're also going to mix up another pile that's a little bit bluer. So I took about half of that first pile, moved it to the right, and I'm going to add a little tiny bit more blue to it. Then that far left-hand pile has a little bit of Montserrat orange in it, that Montserrat orange Indian yellow mixture, so that it is going to be reflecting a little bit of the sun off of the cloud. So here we have our full palette. Happy painting, everyone!